The views and opinions expressed on this podcast is solely of the creator and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of the listeners. Listener discretion is advised. ChatGPT and AI technologies were not used or harmed during the creation of this podcast.
This creepy, abandoned town is literally hell on earth. Helltown is a former Native American village located near the abandoned town of Newville, Ohio. In 1970, the townspeople were displaced by the U.S. government, essentially turning it into a ghost town. Though the land was meant to be used as a national park, in all these years it hasn't, leading to many theories as to why the town was evacuated in the first place. Some people believe there was a toxic chemical spill that led to mutations in local wildlife. The most infamous of these is the peninsula python, a snake that supposedly grew larger due to radioactivity and slithers near the abandoned town. Although this is a complete rumor, and the snake in this photo is not from this case. Others believe the town was taken over by Satanists who use it to lure in unsuspecting travelers. One reason people believe this theory is the infamous white church in the center of the town, which is covered in upside-down crosses.
Hey guys, welcome back to Under the Moon Paranormal Ohio Legends. So, as you listened to and did that little intro there's a lot to unpack in this episode. Since it's the second full moon in August, we are going to do this theme for this month. Last couple weeks ago, the beginning of the month, we gave you the episode of the ghost town of Moonville, Ohio. Well, this episode's about a ghost town as well. Boston Mills, or Helltown, Ohio. Before we get into the episode, just a couple of announcements. This is an independent podcast. I do everything, the editing, the research, putting it all together is all on my own. I don't ask for donations or anything. All I asked is if you have a story that you would like me to share on the podcast, email me at underthemoonparapod@gmail.com. Also, I have a YouTube channel, so click on the link tree in the show's description and you will see my link tree and it will take you directly to my YouTube channel. And there you will find all kinds of content that has nothing to do with this podcast. So, that's the announcements. Let's get into today's episode. The village that is Helltown today was originally settled by another native Indian tribe. The Mingo tribe belonged to the Eastern group, but the Mingo had abandoned the site in 1755, and following their expulsion following the Treaty of Easton in 1758, the Lenape tribe refounded the settlement in the 1700s. Helltown was settled by the Lenape in the 1700s and abandoned in 1782. The name for the village was Cleartown, named after the clear stream nearby. But for some reason, upon learning that the German word for clear is hell, the Lenape renamed it Helltown. The town wasn't inhabited for very long and was abandoned in 1782. because of the repeated clashes with the colonial American troops and settlers. The Lenape were treated harshly because of some of them had sided with the British in the American War of Independence. Tragically, in 1782, that violence came to a crescendo, and in 1782, the Grand Hutton Massacre, where the American militia killed 96 Lenape, right there on the land that is Helltown, Ohio. A number of Lenape persisted at the site after the Lenape abandoned it until 1881, when local farmers plowed them. Ironic that the town with such sad history filled with Native American expulsions would have seemingly appropriate name like Helltown, even though it doesn't actually refer to hell at all. It is called Helltown and is known for the tragic history of the toxic chemical spills, according to the Keaton Law Firm. It is nestled in the Cayuga Valley in Ohio. The parts of it are in the Cayuga Valley National Park. It is regarded by locals as Helltown, that no one lives there. In the center of town, there is a tiny white church. Some say the church is a place of worship for Satanists still lurking around in the areas of closed-off roads. Others think the town was evacuated after a chemical spill that resulted in bizarre mutations of the residents and the animals. There are even some stories of an abandoned school bus that was going to the nearby ski resorts of Boston, Ohio. But on hearing that a young boy in Helltown needed help, it headed into the town and met its fate. Today the bus sits as a warning to those thinking of venturing into Helltown. Helltown is one of the most haunted places in the United States and is home to 6 or 7 different legends. Another of the most haunted places in America, the part of Boston Township of Ohio. Boston is the oldest village in the Summit County. There are 2 closed roads labeled dead ends of Helltown. One of them they call the road to nowhere. I guess that's where the Satanists are supposed to apparently live. So that's a little bit of the history. Let me get into the rest of the history real quick, and then we'll get into some of these legends. Now with these legends, there's going to be some debunking. So is Helltown really haunted, or were these legends put in place to keep people away from Helltown for some reason? So, some more history here. Helltown is a name for Lenape, or Delaware Native American village located on Clear Creek near the abandoned town of Newville. The site is on High Hill just north of the junction of Clear Creek and the Black Fork of the Moroccan River. After signing the Treaty of Easton in 1758, the Lenape were required to move out west, out of their native land. So they all had to leave Delaware, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, and today it's known as Ohio. They all had to leave and move out west. The village had originally been settled by the Native Americans of the Mingo. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right, Mingo, a tribe belonging to the Eastern group. But the Mingo abandoned the site in 1755, whereas then the Lenape came in and got it in 1776. And for some reason, the Lenape knew German, and they called it Clear Town, which translates to Helltown. Doesn't make any sense to me why they would know German so well. So, investigations in the late 19th century found that the site of the village was a high mound composed of primarily of sandstone rocks, held in place with packed earth. A number of Lenape graves existed at this site until 1881, but local farmers plowed them over for the next couple of years. Diggings at the site found iron knives, iron tomahawks, stone arrowheads, a stone axe, a gun flint, and some brass mountings from a musket. So it sounds like this place was already cursed. in my opinion, America is not America. It belongs to the native people that were here before us. And when tragic things happen and people come in and remove ancient burial grounds and try to build a town on top of it. So from the 1780s to 1970s is when this town was, I guess, at its best. It had families, general stores, churches. It was a thriving little community for that period of time. So now we're going to get into some locations and the history behind some of these locations in Helltown. And then we're going to get into the legends that surround Helltown. And let me tell you, there's quite a bit of legends. Helltown is a dark, foreboding place where ghosts, cults, and serial killers lurk. An entire town cursed and frighteningly dangerous after dark. So, of course, I'm intrigued and I kind of want to go visit this place, but after reading some local accounts of people coming here and staying there until almost dawn, and the weird things that happen to them, like being chased out by people with black robes, that's kind of scary if you ask me. So, Helltown is a nickname, like we said, given by Native Americans. These areas, there was many areas that combined together to make this Boston Township or Boston Mills. So moving on from the 1700s. In 1806, Boston stands as the oldest village in Summit County. The first mill was built in the village in the early 1820s. Several years later, the construction of the Ohio and Erie Canal brought more people to this small community. And over the next few decades, Boston mills began to flourish in the area. Most notably known as the paper mills, and when the railroad station was constructed in the town in the early 1880s, the station was named Boston Mills in reference to the paper mill. So, in the late 1960s, a nationwide movement began that expressed concern over the destruction of our national forest. In response, President Ford signed a legislation in 1974 that enabled the National Park Services to purchase land and use it to create national parks. On December 27, 1974, hundreds of acres of land, including some within the township of Boston Mills, were officially designed as a national recreation area. Many people did not realize that this legislation gave the federal government the power to use the right of eminent domain to acquire land from private owners in order to clear the way for the national park. But almost immediately after the bill was passed, the government began purchasing houses throughout Boston Township and the surrounding area. Once the government decided to buy a property, there was no negotiation involved. The owners were forced to relocate. Residents began leaving in droves, and the entire township there was swallowed up by the Cayuga Valley National Park. These events were so tragic that they were featured in the 1983 PBS documentary For the Good of All. Perhaps the general feelings of a displaced homeowners were best summed up in the statement found scrawled across the wall of the vacant home. We now know how the Indians felt. Once the government bought a house, it was boarded up and covered with the U.S. issued no trespassing sign. The house sat vacant until the government could arrange for it to be demolished. Some of the houses were intentionally burned as training exercises for local fire departments. With hundreds of homes being purchased in such short period of time, the government quickly fell behind schedule in tearing them down. And it was not uncommon to drive down the street and find several boarded up houses sitting next to the burned out remains of others. To a passing motorist unaware of the events taking place in the area, you might have easily seemed as if the entire town had been mysteriously disappeared into thin air. And this is how rumors began. The legends of Helltown. The number of stories circulating about Helltown is so great that it could be nearly impossible to track them all. In many cases, the stories weave in and out of each other. Here are some of the more well-known legends and the true stories behind each of them. Government conspiracy. Legend number 1. There is a government cover-up to hide the fact that they spilled deadly chemicals in the area. These chemicals have caused bizarre mutations to the area's residents and their children. The truth? Stories regarding a government conspiracy referred to the area where the chemicals were spilled as either Butane Town, or Mutant Town. The first two named after the chemical said to have been spilled, and last describing the result as an alleged spill. Records show that there was never a chemical spill of any type in the area. These stories were most likely attempts to explain the various U.S. government signs on the abandoned buildings. Legend number 2, the cemetery. The local cemetery is haunted by a ghost that sits on a bench and stares blankly into creation. The truth? Interestingly, the ghost in the cemetery is almost always described in a precise way, with no further details offered, because there is so little descriptive information about this actual ghost that it is nearly impossible to determine the story or identity accompanying it. The home is alleged the spirit of Boston Cemetery, which interestingly the cemetery has no bench at all. Coincidentally enough, the cemetery is one of the few remaining things left in this place. Even though they demolished the ancient Indian burial grounds, they still left the cemetery, which has a couple of notable headstones in it. Some say the trees move in the cemetery. The truth behind this one, the legend is another one that appears on a large number of websites, but again, no additional information is given. One email the Ghost of Ohio received claimed that the members of the satanic cult caused the trees to move in order to protect the cult's secrets. Nothing of substance reports this claim. More about the cemetery. Boston Cemetery contains the graves of a large number of children who were killed in a bus accident. The truth is, there was no bus accident. As with many cemeteries, there are children's graves in the Boston Cemetery, but none of them is the result of a bus crash. This legend was likely started in an attempt to tie the cemetery to the legend of the school bus, which we will talk to about that in a minute. Just a quick note here, Ohio cemeteries gated or not close at dusk. If you are inside a cemetery after dark, you are trespassing. Due to recent vandalism in the Boston Cemetery, this area is now patrolled on a regular basis. If you are caught inside the Boston Cemetery at night, you will be arrested. Legend number 3, the house in the woods. There is an abandoned house in the woods where one light always appears in the upstairs window. And it's said that if you find the house and you go inside the house and it disappears, you'll disappear too. I guess this house appears and disappears all the time. It's a very strange legend, but here's the truth behind this one. There is actually a house in Boston Township where a light stays on all night. It is the local hostel. Yes, there is an actual active hostel inside this ghost town called Helltown. I don't know about you, but I don't know if I'd want to stay the night there. A lodging house for young travelers, the light stays on since it accepts guests 24 hours a day. The house sits some distance off the road though, but it's not in the woods. There are several signs posted that direct travelers to the hostel, including one right at the end of the driveway. Interestingly though, right around the time that these signs were posted, the legend of the light in the upstairs window and the disappearing house began to cite the school bus house instead of a hostel. So let's talk about the school bus. Legend number 4. A whole busload of children were slaughtered in the woods by a serial killer. A band of serial killers, an escaped mental patient, several escaped mental patients, or sometimes the legend says a group of Satanist or cult members, depending on who's telling the story. The bus is not there anymore. It was there until I think 2016 or 2017 when they kind of reopened up the town to tourists because it's like a haunted location, I guess. Sometimes the bus fills up with ghosts and the murdered children, each one sitting in his or her ghostly seat. Sometimes the ghost of a man, aka the killer, smoking a cigarette is seen in the back of a bus. Other times, only the children's screams or laughter are heard coming from inside the bus. Locals have attempted to tow away the cursed bus, but each time they have tried, some mishap occurred that often resulted in an injury. Eventually, they decided to leave the bus there, which now we know the bus is no longer there. The truth behind this one: prior to the 1974 buyout of the town, a family bought a house that was in dire need of repairs. Since the house was not in livable condition, the family needed a temporary place to stay nearby while they made the repairs. They decided to bring in an old school bus onto the property and live in it until the repairs were completed. In order to have more living space, they removed the seats from the bus. When the government bought the properties, the family had no use for the old bus and it was left behind. The local government has since had the bus removed, since the area residents have registered complaints about the large number of people searching in the woods at night looking for such cursed bus. Note, this is also why there are abandoned cars, farm equipment scattered across the area. In most cases, non-working machinery was simply just left behind to rot. Legend number 5. The church. Local churches are used as a cover for the cults. The church is never open for mass, no matter what time you go there. There is an evil man who lives in the basement and guards the church against outsiders. He refuses to let people see his face and hides if you try to look at him. A group of devil worshippers own the church. There are always candles burning in the church, even at night, and the church has upside-down crosses all over it. So the truth behind all these legends are: in fact, there are 2 churches in which these legends refer. Boston Community Mother of Sorrows, one of 2. Boston Community Church is the one that is more often the focus on legends, particularly the ones involving the man in the basement. The basement of the Boston Community Church houses classrooms and offices. Chances are that any man spotted in the basement was a church employee. Understandably startled by having strangers peer at him, perhaps startled enough to jump out of the way. The reference to seeing lit candles inside the church at night may be true. Many religious centers allow members of their congregation to light candles in memory of departed loved ones. These candles are often permitted to continue burning even after the ceremony. Mother of Sorrows is the church alleged to have upside-down crosses hanging from it. The crosses are actually design elements in the church's gingerbread trim, which occurred quite frequently in the Gothic revival style of the architecture of the time. Both churches are listed in local directories, something that would likely be unknown if they were affiliated with a secret cult. You can see the listing for Boston Community Church by clicking some links I'm going to add down at the bottom of the description of this episode. In addition, you can see the photo of the Mother of Sorrows Church by visiting Explore Peninsula and taking their virtual heritage tour. The link entitled Main Street South is where you will find the photo of the church. Both churches display crosses in the traditional manner. Legend number 6. The Hearse. If you go past the road closed signs, you will find a house in which is a very creepy man, or in some stories a creepy family lives there. The man drives a hearse and will chase you away if you get too close to his house. In some versions of this legend, the hearse has only one headlight. A hearse with one headlight chased us through town, unquote. Or, we tried to follow the hearse, but it vanished out at the end of the road, unquote. The truth behind this is, there is a bit of truth to this legend. According to Randy Burdorf, the curator-historian of the Peninsula Library and Historical Society, there was a Boston Township family that owned a hearse at one time, though they only used it at Halloween. I mean, come on. It's Ohio. Even my little town of Greenfield had a guy that drove a hearse, and he gave rides for $1 through the cemetery on trick-or-treat night. So, no big deal. That's just something we do in Ohio. People own hearses. There's no law against it. Anyway, however, it is impossible to drive past the road closed signs. The gates across the roads are locked tight. There is a creek running alongside the road, and the area is heavily wooded on both sides. A hearse would not be able to navigate this stretch of road. Legend number 7, the end of the world. Evil awaits all those who drive this road at night. The road is this road is possessed, and there have been many fatal car crashes on it. An evil force will try to take control of your car and force you to crash. If you drive at the end of the world at night, a group of robed Satanists will surround your car and form a human chain to attempt to trap you there. I don't know about you, but if a bunch of Satanists are circling my car holding hands in a circle, we hitting that gas pedal and running them over. I don't care. That's just weird. Y'all with the cult? The truth is, Stanford Road is a twisting road with a steep incline. At the top of the hill, there is a sudden drop down to the other side. Motorists looking for a cheap thrill will begin driving up Stanford Road at a very high rate of speed. As their car crests the hill, the illusion of driving off a cliff or like the end of the world was created. Considering the amount of reckless driving that has taken place on Stanford Road over the years, it is no surprise that there have been several fatalities. It is unlikely that they were caused by any paranormal activity, though. Stanford Road is one of the famous dead-end roads, and cult and murders are initially part of its lore. There is no evidence, historical or otherwise, to back up these claims. Legend number 8, Highway to Hell. A serial killer with an axe has been butchering motorists who travel this road at night. Police are unable to apprehend him. Don't drive down Highway to Hell at night. There are crazy people who hide in the woods and will jump out at you. The truth is, this road is actually the same one that takes motorists to the end of the world road. The Highway to Hell legend is a classic example of how urban legends form. Start with a harmless activity, add some tried and true horror elements, and then give the place a creepy name. Boom, perfect urban legend. The dead-end roads are mostly the photos that you see of Helltown. The description photo for this episode is one of these roads. Actually, it's the end of the world road is the picture that we're using. If you go past the road closed signs in Helltown to the end of the road street, you will find a creepy cemetery. There are 2 roads that dead end for no reason. The roads both continue. The Satanists put up the road closed signs up to keep you from going down to their hideouts. The truth is, Boston Cemetery sits at the end of Main Street, a paved road without any road closed signs on it. Driving down Main Street towards the cemetery is very much like coming to the end of a street in a subdivision. The road simply ends at the entrance to the cemetery. Stanford Road has 2 road closed signs on it, and as the photo shows, the roads do not continue past these signs. When Stanford Road was in full operation, it cut through several townships. Over time, a portion of the road reached such a state of disrepair that traveling on it was unsafe. Sycamore Hills and Northfield Center Township each owned a portion of Stanford Road and were both asked to make the necessary repairs to the road. But neither one was willing to bear the financial burden of bringing that portion of the road up to code or to shoulder the liability should someone get hurt or, its current conditions were crap. So the simplest solution was to close that portion of Stanford Road. In order to successfully close the damaged section of Stanford Road, barricades and road close signs were placed on both ends, effectively creating two dead-end streets. The fact that there are two places where Stanford Road dead ends onto these road close signs, along with the abandoned houses that dot the landscape, lends itself a very, that's how rumors get started kind of thing. So, moving on. I think I've lost count. I think we're at number 8 or 9. Okay, this one's called the Slaughterhouse. You will see ghostly faces if you look inside the windows of the slaughterhouse. Note. Nah. A lot of these photos that I've seen on the internet, the lenses are like flaring against the sun, creating these matrixing looking pictures. The truth is here, there was never an official slaughterhouse in Boston Mills. Okay? Remember, this was not your average town. This was a mill town, not a slaughterhouse town. The building that is referred to the old slaughterhouse sits next to Boston Cemetery and is actually part of an old duplex built for tenants from the neighboring mill. The old building sits next to a more modern home. The contrast between the two buildings insinuates the rundown appearance of the duplex. The duplex has actually been acknowledged for its historical significance, and it is part of the historical district. It stands as one of only 2 houses in the entire U.S. that the Park Service has sold back to private ownership. Number 9, the funeral home. There is an abandoned funeral home next to the cemetery. Well, that does not make sense. Candles are often seen burning in the windows at night, and cult members will chase you away if you get too close to the building. The building some call the abandoned funeral home is the same one the others say is the old slaughterhouse. So those two legends kind of go together. Well, this next one's going to be great. Number 10, the Children of the Corn, y'all. There is some connection between Boston Township and the movie The Children of the Corn. The movie was filmed in Boston Township. Go figure. That's the legend, right? Let's see if that's true. Satanic props from the movie were left behind by production crew and now being used by the area Satanists. The movie was based on real-life events that took place in Helltown. Alright, here's the truth behind that. The original Children of the Corn, released in 1984 by New World Pictures, was filmed in Whiting, Iowa. Sequels to the film were shot in various locations throughout California. By 1983, around the time that the original Children of the Corn was being filmed, the National Park Service had already been acquiring land for almost 9 years. Special permission from the Department of Interior would have been required in order to film the movie in the area. So there's no truth to that statement. That film was inspired by actual events that took place in Boston Township. The film was based on the Stephen King short story by the same name, and that appeared in his collection of short stories, Night Shift, in both of the King's stories in the original film. The setting was Gatlin, Nebraska. Subsequent, the movie released were all set either within the town of Gatlin or within nearby cities, but never outside Nebraska. The satanic activity warnings is our next legend and lore. Number 11. Local authorities warn motorists not to travel through Boston Township at night due to satanic activity. In the effort to curb the trespassing and vandalism that is taking place in Boston Township, trustees have asked the Summit County Sheriff's Department to tell individuals to move along. They should be found loitering in certain areas at night, including near the cemetery. So they do not want you in this town at night. but there's a hostel, which I still don't understand. Okay. Number 12, Ghostly AAA. There is a Crybaby Bridge. Of course there are. Man, you know I'm going to do an episode eventually about all the Crybaby Bridges in Ohio. There are too many. It is said that if you bring an extra set of keys, park on the bridge, turn your car off, lock the doors, and walk away with the keys just sitting inside, you will come back to the car. It will be covered in dust with little footprints all over it, and the car will be running but still locked. The truth is, this particular legend incorporates to some classic ghost-related urban legend elements, most notably the references to a Crybaby Bridge and the footprints left on cars. Crybaby bridges can be found throughout throughout the whole U.S. Man, I can't talk now. The Ghost of Ohio's database contains references to at least 18 such bridges in Ohio alone. 18! Rumors of ghostly prints appearing on your car are common elements to this urban legend. In most cases, however, the prints are handprints, and this is only the reference to ghostly footprints that we know of. Ohio sites where this phenomenon has been reported include Gravity Hill and the Gore Orphanage. Conclusions. My conclusions on these alone are, it's just rumors, and it's just to keep people away from the cemetery and away from this abandoned place. It's supposed to be a national park now. A couple of other legends are about a couple of tombstones that are in the cemetery. One is the guy that came in, and the government guy that pretty much came in and took all the land, had made people move out of their places that they lived in. His last name was Birdsell, and right after he evicted all these people, pretty much, he had a heart attack and died, and he's supposed to be buried at the cemetery in Helltown. How true is that? I don't know, because I couldn't find any actual documentation on it. So before we talk about the last two legends, we're going to take a quick break and do Luna and Chico's Clout Corner. Hey, Luna. Hey, this is part of our podcast where I promote my local friends. If you have a local business, a side hustle, or a hobby that you want some free clout for, well, me and my dog Luna will talk about it on the pod. So this time on this episode, Luna's been talking all about these sick beats and graphics I got from my podcast. And Luna, she wants to know where I came up with these graphics and beats. Well, Luna, guess what? I had a little help from my cousin Bradley. Yeah. He also goes by Ysosima, Ysosima. But do you need some intro beats for a podcast or a YouTube channel? Or maybe you need some graphic art or album art or some help with some graphics for your business? Ysosima has the best beats and a creative mind that will blow you away. And the price is right. So hit up Ysosima for all your digital needs. Link to find him is in the show notes. And now, back to the show. Alright, welcome back. So, the last 3 legends that we're going to talk about in Helltown. The first one is the Witch of Helltown. Legend says she lived out by the now defunct lock that ran through the town peninsula before it became a hot tourist district. Okay, so she was rarely seen in the daytime, and even Then she hid her face from others under the large floppy straw hat that she seemed to keep over her long stringy white hair. She spent her time walking around the local forest areas collecting wild mushrooms and herbs. She always kept her basket beside her, and the aged hands that carried them, covered in liver spots, were twisted to the bones like an old tree trunk. Her gray, wrinkled skin bore the markings of someone that held a dark past, and whether it was done to her or by others was anyone's guess. The town people would often sneak away to visit the old woman, among those late-night shadows that hovered above them in the streets, and all along the cobblestone beneath their feet. By the call of midnight they came seeking their fortunes and potions, for their love spells and medicine to cure the sick, and sometimes they were one and the same. One of those men that came called himself Big Sam. He would often ask the old woman to give him any information about other townspeople. In exchange, he would pay her some handsomely and allow her to keep her house just at the edge of the waterway. He would use information he obtained from the Helltown witch against the people and blackmail them not into giving him their riches and their land. Big Sam swindled money out of these townsfolk, causing his farm to get to more massive and more vast every year. One of the animals that lived on the farm was a snow-white goat that was Big Sam's prized buck. Big Sam pampered it and took such good care of that animal that rumor was that he'd often be heard talking to the goat and telling that goat all his troubles. The old witch knew this, and when Big Sam came calling for his fortunes, in a manner of speaking, she would often distract him by asking about his goat. The old witch wasn't stupid. She knew that if she gave Big Sam too much information about the people in the town, she would lose her place in her quiet life. The discussion about Big Sam's goat would often take up an hour, and Big Sam paid the witch for to swindle the information out of her. He was often under the influence after coming back from the local tavern, and soon 1 hour would be over and Big Sam would forget why he even visited in the first place, handing over a small bag of money to the woman. Eventually, Big Sam figured out what the witch was doing, and so one night he came calling on the witch, beating down the door and demanding to know every secret she had kept from him about the people in the town. "I won't help you any more. You have taken and drained these townspeople of their wealth. You have done enough to pass down to 150 sons." Big Sam only became angered by this. "All right, you old witch, mark my words, you will regret refusing me this." By the next morning, the old woman was dragged into the center of town, and in front of every one of those townspeople was forced to take off her ragged black clothes and her old straw hat. The old woman's body bore scars that looked like burn marks all over her body. The audience that Big Sam had afforded to stared at this creature in awe. Every one of them was too afraid of what Big Sam would do if they stepped in to help her. Witches burn, but as you can see by these scars, this one lives. In Exodus 22:18, God says, "Never permit a sorceress to live. Perhaps water will do, fire could not." Then Big Sam had the woman tied to the back of his horse and buggy and forced her to walk to the old water dock. As he forced her to walk in her bare feet, he looked back to see the prideful face of the old woman. She did not scream, she did not cry, she only watched the back of Big Sam's head. When they finally reached the edge of the river, he and his men tied rocks to her old feet and readied himself to lower her body into the water, and he stopped to look at her one last time. "Do you have any last words, witch?" She only smiled at him with one wide, crooked grin. He noticed her eyes were clouded and milky, and almost resembled silver spoons. "I regret nothing. You will see me again, sir. You will see these eyes staring back at yours some fine evening. If you do, then you will know I have come for you, and from that moment I will not leave your side until you are dead. So bury me hard and bury me fast, for the only lightning can strike can set me free." Big Sam's patience was not vast, and not at all at once full of anger, he kicked her into the water with his giant black boot and watched her drown. When she was pronounced dead, he had her put in the local cemetery with the tallest headstone marker. It would be placed there to be a constant reminder that Big Sam was the man in charge and not to cross him or dig your own grave. This tribute to the witch's pride only worked against Big Sam for over the next 3 years. Lightning struck that grave time and time again because it was the tallest thing in the graveyard. Each time lightning struck the headstone, it created a crack in the structure and getting closer to cracking the stone beneath it that covered the old woman's grave. There was a nasty storm one night, and the cemetery plot finally broke open, and the gravedigger that was witness to the final stroke of lightning saw the large headstone shift and slide down onto the earth, causing a crack in the very soil where the witch was laid to rest. That same night, Big Sam woke startled from the light nightmare in which the old witch rose from her grave and dragged him into the water, and he felt the air leave his lungs as he rose from his bed. Restless, Big Sam had put on his robe, boots, and headed out to the barn where he kept his goat. Big Sam sat down on the bar stool next to the goat's pen, where the buck lived in a lap of luxury, lit a match, and began smoking his pipe. He sighed, petting the goat's head, looked up at the night sky. The horned beast chewed on some grass while Big Sam stroked the pet's head, and he began to tell the goat about his lousy dream. And as he did, the goat stopped eating and looked up at the man. The goat stared at him for a minute before Big Sam's met his gaze locking eyes. When he looked down at the goat, looking back at him were the eyes that looked like silver spoons, that same as the witch bore the day that he murdered her. Big Sam now was suffering in shock, clutched his chest, falling to the ground to his death. Legend has it the old witch's spirit still haunts the cemetery. If you see her apparition, it's always a solid white goat. So, the truth behind that one. Big Sam is a metaphor for the government, Uncle Sam, Big Sam, coming in, taking all these people's homes. The witch's tombstone belongs to a man that made his own tombstone before he died. And it's been struck by lightning, but it's only fallen apart because it was poorly made. So that's the legend of the Witch of Helltown. The next notable legend is tucked away behind the legends, which sprang up from so many residents being evicted when the National Park Service claimed the town through the intimate domain. There are truly mysterious incidents from Helltown which are rarely heard. Possibly the strangest is the story of Jim Brown, who was both a sheriff and a counterfeiter. After surviving being struck by lightning in a local tavern, Brown proclaimed that even the good Lord couldn't strike him down. Brown later died from a fall into a canal boat, and that's not the real mystery. Years of counterfeiting led to the fast fortune in gold dust. Exactly what happened to the $200,000 in gold dust today is worth $4.3 million, and it is still unfound. So that's a good legend too. The last legend that we are I'm going to add this link because it's a really long story, and that's going to take some time. It's the Peninsula Python. Yeah. There's a big ass snake out here in Helltown that is either said to be escaped from a circus in the 1940s. That's when it was first seen. Or it was from that chemical spill. So the alleged chemical spill is why Helltown was supposed to be evicted. The chemical spills did something to that poor snake and made it grow 19 feet long. But that's how long the witnesses say that the snake is. 19 foot, yeah. So I'm going to add that link down here in the show notes, as well as the Ghost of Ohio, the lore and legends of Helltown, and the real stories behind Helltown. I'm also going to add my YouTube link with some really cool YouTube channels that are local Ohio urban explorers that go to Helltown repeatedly, and some weird things happen to them. It's like getting chased out of there. It's like the big thing with Helltown. So, in conclusion, everyone loves a good ghost story, and it's always fun to give your friends a scare. But please remember, however, if you are sharing stories of Helltown with others, you are no longer merely providing entertainment. You are spreading rumors and lies that are causing people to trespass, vandalize, and being disrespectful to Boston Mills residents, because there are very few people that live around this Helltown place. A lot of people pretty much just park wherever they want and just walk around this place because they think it's completely abandoned. It's really not, though. I mean, if you go there, you'll see it's like any other almost abandoned place in Ohio. It's being taken care of still. Like, the lawns are being mowed, just the stretches where the road closed, where people go to walk or ride bikes down to see these lores and legends of Helltown. I mean, it's just very strange. It's supposed to be a national park, but it's really, really bizarre. The videos I have on my podcast reference playlist are pretty good, so I'm going to add that in there too. So now we're going to part of our program where we have a listener submitted story. This week's story comes from my brother, my only brother, my one sibling, and it's pretty much about a gas station encounter, my first gas station horror story. So I'm going to retell it for my brother the best way that I can. My brother gets off work late after midnight, and there's only one gas station open in our town after midnight. So he goes there like he does almost every night, and he sees this young lady sitting outside, and she's like, "Do you have a lighter?" And he says, "Yeah, I left it in my truck, I'm sorry." So he goes in, makes his purchase, comes back out. When he comes back out, she's sitting at his truck by his door waiting for him, wanting to use this lighter. So my brother instantly has this feeling like something's off with her. And the conversation they have after this is pretty strange. It goes like this. "Can I use your lighter?" "Yeah, give me a second. Let me get in my truck and get it." And at this point, when he goes to get in his truck, she's standing in a way where he can't close his door. So he gives her the lighter, and she's like, "I've been looking for you." My brother said, "Who are you? Do I know you?" "Oh, they call me Sam. That's what I'm allowed to be called." "Well, I don't know you. I gotta get back to work soon. You can use my lighter, though." She stands there staring at the sky, and she says to him, "They're up there watching me. Only 3 of us are allowed to live." And she names off some names that my brother doesn't remember, didn't recognize the names. And he's like, "Huh? Who's up there?" "Them. They're watching." He's like, Do you want a cigarette?" Because she was trying to light a cigarette butt, and she still hasn't lit it at this point. So my brother gives her a cigarette, and she asked him, "Are you lonely tonight?" "Oh, no, ma'am. I gotta get back to my wife and kids." So as soon as she, moves to light that cigarette, my brother hightails it out of there. My brother said that his total instinct when he was talking to this lady was she was possibly on some kind of drugs or mentally unstable, and my brother did not feel safe around her. He was scared to tell her no because her eyes would water up like she was going to cry or yell, or she could have hauled off and hit him or stabbed him with something. Like, we don't know. In this time of year, it's like almost 100 degrees, and she was wearing a hoodie. She had to have been sweating balls underneath that if she was on drugs, right? So I don't know. That was my first gas station horror story. Let me know what you think about it. And if you have a story of your own in Ohio or a surrounding Ohio state, and you have a creepy ass story or a scary story or just a strange, bizarre happening that you know about, email me and I'll share your story on the pod. Email me at underthemoonparapod@gmail.com. So this is the second full moon in August. This is what they call a blue moon. It's also the biggest supermoon that we're going to have this year. So get out there and bathe underneath that moonlight, my friends. You are going to love how beautiful it looks. And here's to hoping for some clear skies in Ohio that night. Well, this episode's coming to a close. I want to thank you for joining me this evening. Remember to share it with a friend and add it to your episodes, download it, rate the show. All that helps me out a ton. And always remember, stay spooky, my friends.